The emergency department of St. Catherine Medical Center never sleeps, but at 2:47 on a Thursday morning in November 2024, it breathes with a particular kind of exhaustion. The kind that comes from 12 straight hours of trauma, tragedy, and the thin line between them. Dr. Maricel Delgado stands in Trauma Bay 3, suturing a motorcyclist's forehead laceration with the mechanical precision of someone who has performed this exact procedure somewhere close to 3,000 times in her 8-year career. Her hands move without conscious thought. Pierce, loop, pull, tie. Pierce, loop, pull, tie. The rhythm is meditation, the only kind she allows herself anymore. At 34, Maricel has perfected the art of existing in the present tense. No past to haunt her, no future to disappoint her. Just this moment, this patient, this stitch. "You're good to go, Mr. Reyes," she says, snipping the final suture. "Keep it dry for 48 hours. Follow up with your primary care doctor in 1 week." She doesn't wait for thanks. She's already moving to the next chart, the next crisis, the next opportunity to prove that she can save people even if she couldn't save the one who mattered most. The nursing staff calls her the Ice Queen of Emergency, and Maricel wears the title like armor. Chief ER physician at one of Manila's busiest hospitals, she runs her department with the efficiency of a woman who understands that hesitation kills. Her residents fear her standards. Her colleagues respect her competence. Her patients never see the exhaustion behind her eyes because she's learned to hide it somewhere deeper than professional courtesy can reach. Nurse Elena Reyes, a 15-year veteran who has worked alongside Maricel since her residency, approaches with a fresh cup of coffee. Black, no sugar. The way Maricel has drunk it since medical school, when sweetness felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. "Third shift in 4 days, Elena observes, handing over the cup. "You're going to burn out." "I'll burn out when I'm dead," Maricel replies, scanning the ER board. 12 patients currently being treated, 3 waiting for admission, 1 coding in the ICU upstairs. A typical Thursday night bleeding into Friday morning. Besides, sleep is overrated. Elena knows better than to argue. She's seen Maricel arrive at 6 a.m. and leave at midnight, seen her skip meals and work through migraines, seen her save 17 critical patients in a single shift without breaking composure. But Elena has also seen the photograph Maricel keeps in her locker. 2 women, arms around each other, laughing at some long-forgotten joke. Sisters, clearly. Same bone structure, same smile. Except one of them is dead now, and the other one saves strangers with the fervor of someone seeking redemption for a sin she didn't commit. The radio crackles to life, and the unit coordinator's voice cuts through the ambient noise of monitors and ventilators. "Incoming trauma. Male, approximately mid-30s, multi-vehicle collision on South Luzon Expressway. Unconscious, GCS 7, multiple fractures, suspected internal bleeding, no identification. ETA 4 minutes. Maricel sets down her coffee, untouched. Prep Trauma Bay 3. 2 units O negative on standby. Get me a central line kit and call surgical consult if I need them. Her voice carries the weight of absolute authority, the kind earned through a decade of making life-or-death decisions in the space between heartbeats. The trauma team assembles with practiced efficiency. Dr. Ramon Cruz, a second-year resident with more enthusiasm than experience, positions himself at the foot of the bed. 2 nurses check equipment. An orderly, Ben Mercado, a former military medic who understands the choreography of crisis, stands ready with supplies. They're a machine and Maricel is the operator. "Vitals on arrival," she instructs. "I want a full trauma panel, cross-match for 4 units, and portable X-ray standing by. Dr. Cruz, you're on airway management if I need you." Questions? No one has questions. They never do. Maricel's protocols are comprehensive, her expectations clear, her tolerance for error non-existent. She has saved 2,847 lives in her career. She remembers each one. She also remembers the 127 she lost. Those names live in a different part of her memory, the part she visits at 3 in the morning, when sleep won't come and the past refuses to stay buried. The ambulance siren grows louder, closer, urgent. Maricel pulls on a fresh pair of gloves, rolling her shoulders once to release tension. This is her arena. This is where she has control. This is where she decides who lives and who dies, where her hands steady when the rest of the world shakes, where she is valuable and necessary and whole. The automatic doors burst open. 2 paramedics rush in with a gurney, their patient strapped down and covered in blood, face obscured by oxygen mask and trauma, body twisted at angles that suggest multiple fractures. The paramedic running the head of the gurney rattles off vitals. Male, unidentified, found unconscious at the scene. GCS dropped from 7 to 5 en route. BP 90 over 60 and falling. Heart rate 132. Decreased breath sounds on the left side, probable pneumothorax. No response to verbal stimuli. We've got 2 large-bore IVs running wide open. On my count, Maricel commands. 1, 2, 3. They transfer him to the trauma bed with practice synchronization. Maricel moves to his right side, already assessing. Her hands move over his body with clinical detachment, cataloging injuries. Multiple rib fractures, distended abdomen suggesting internal bleeding, deformed left femur, lacerations across his face and scalp. Get those clothes off. I need to see everything. Dr. Cruz, hand me the trauma shears. The team works in orchestrated silence, cutting away fabric, exposing skin and damage beneath. Maricel barks orders without looking up. Start a chest tube setup. His left lung is collapsed. Get me an ultrasound to check for free fluid in the abdomen. And someone clean his face so I can assess for facial fractures. It's routine. Brutal, bloody routine. Another broken body on another Thursday night. Another stranger whose life depends on her skill and speed. She's in her element, focused entirely on the medical puzzle before her, when the patient groans. Just one sound, a wordless exhalation of pain, barely audible above the organized chaos. Maricel's hands freeze mid-examination. The groan comes again, slightly different this time. A specific timbre, a particular resonance that bypasses her conscious mind and travels directly into a memory she has spent 6 years trying to cauterize shut. She knows that sound. Her fingers, steady only seconds ago, begin to tremble. The surgical scissors slip slightly in her grip. She recovers quickly, muscle memory overriding the shock ricocheting through her nervous system, but the damage is done. Recognition, unwanted and undeniable, floods through her. Dr. Delgado? Elena's voice cuts through the white noise filling Maricel's ears. You okay? Fine, Maricel says, but her voice sounds distant even to herself. Continue. She forces herself to breathe, to focus, to treat this like any other patient. Ben wipes blood away from the man's face with gauze, revealing features that make Maricel's chest constrict. Older than she remembers, thinner. A fresh scar cuts across his jaw, and time has carved lines around his eyes that weren't there before. But the bone structure is unmistakable. The shape of his mouth, even slack with unconsciousness, is exactly as she remembers from photographs she has studied with the obsession of someone searching for ghosts. Dante Romualdez. The name screams through her mind, though she doesn't speak it aloud. The man who destroyed her sister. The man who turned love into a weapon and trust into a commodity. The man who killed Lena with his bare hands and walked away into smoke, leaving nothing behind but a body and 6 years of unanswered screaming. Standing over him now, watching his chest rise and fall with mechanical regularity, Maricel feels the earth shift beneath her feet. This is impossible. He vanished. Police searched for him across 3 islands, through a network of aliases and shell companies and dead ends. Private investigators she bankrupted herself hiring found nothing. He was a ghost, untraceable and untouchable. And now he's bleeding on her table. Dr. Cruz looks up from establishing for access. Dr. Delgado, should I push pain medication? Maricel stares at the unconscious man who murdered her sister, at his vulnerable throat, at the 4 lines running into his veins, carrying fluids that will keep him alive, at the monitors tracking his weakening vitals, the numbers that tell her exactly how close to death he's hovering. Not yet, she hears herself say. Let's stabilize him first. Her hands move automatically through trauma protocols while her mind races through 6 years of grief and rage and helplessness. She performs the medical assessment she's been trained to perform, calling out findings in a voice that sounds remarkably steady considering her entire world just collapsed and reformed into something unrecognizable. Decreased breath sounds left side, setting up for chest tube insertion. Abdomen is rigid, probable splenic or hepatic injury. Pupils are sluggish but reactive. GCS is 5. Get me a trauma panel and prep for possible emergency surgery. But beneath the clinical language, beneath the professional competence, beneath everything she has built to survive the loss of her sister, a single thought crystallizes with perfect, terrible clarity. He doesn't know who I am. Not yet. And in this moment, lying broken and helpless on her trauma bed, he's not going anywhere. To understand what is about to happen in Trauma Bay 3, you need to understand Lina Delgado, the sister who believed in fairy tales until reality killed her. The woman who trusted so completely that she couldn't see the monster until his hands were around her throat. 6 years ago, Lina was 24 years old and incandescent with dreams. While her older sister Maricel was grinding through medical residency, surviving on 3 hours of sleep and institutional coffee, Lina was studying fashion design at a small college in Makati. She worked retail at Greenbelt Mall to pay tuition, sketching dress designs during slow afternoon shifts, and believing with absolute conviction that talent and hard work would eventually be enough. The sisters shared a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Quezon City. Maricel paid most of the rent. Lina contributed what she could and filled their home with laughter that Maricel had forgotten she needed. They had lost their mother to cancer 3 years earlier, and their father had died when they were children. They were all each other had, and that felt like enough. "You work too hard, 8, Lina would say, using the Tagalog term of respect for older sister. She'd pull Maricel away from medical journals and force her to watch terrible romantic comedies, to eat meals that weren't hospital cafeteria food, to remember that life existed outside the fluorescent corridors of St. Catherine Medical Center. Maricel, who had raised Lina since their mother's death, who had put her through school and protected her from every danger she could anticipate, loved her sister with the fierce devotion of someone who had already lost too much. "Someone has to be practical," Maricel would respond, but she'd watch the movies anyway. She'd listen to Lina's designs and dreams. She'd let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, hard work and hope could coexist. Then Lina met Dante Romualdez, and everything beautiful turned to ash. It happened at an art gallery opening in Bonifacio Global City. Lina's design professor had invited students to attend, to study composition and color theory in contemporary art. Lina went reluctantly, more interested in fabric than canvas, but she went. Dante was there, 39 years old to her 24, sophisticated in the way of men who have learned to weaponize charm. He approached her while she stood before an abstract piece, pretending to understand it. "It's derivative," he said in English polished by international business schools and frequent travel. "The artist is mimicking Rothko without understanding why Rothko mattered. But you look like someone who understands authenticity." Lina, who had never been noticed by men like this, who spent her days selling clothes to women who barely saw her, felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Validation, visibility, the intoxicating sensation of being chosen. They talked for 2 hours. He bought her expensive wine and listened to her dreams with the focused attention of someone conducting an interview for a position she didn't know she was applying for. He spoke vaguely of import-export business, of opportunities throughout Southeast Asia, of building something meaningful in a world of mass-produced mediocrity. When he asked for her number, she gave it without hesitation. The courtship was a masterclass in manipulation that Lina was too inexperienced to recognize. Flowers delivered to the mall where she worked, expensive enough that her coworkers whispered jealously. Dinners at restaurants she'd only read about in lifestyle magazine. Weekend trips to Tagaytay and Batangas, always staying in resorts that cost more than her monthly salary. He made her feel rare, precious, worth protecting from a world that had always made her feel small. Within 6 weeks, Lina was in love. Within 8 weeks, she'd moved into his luxury condominium in Bonifacio Global City, a 2-bedroom unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. Within 10 weeks, she'd quit her retail job because Dante insisted he could support them both while she focused on her design career. Maricel saw the red flags immediately. "Who is he really?" she demanded during one of their increasingly rare dinners together. "I can't find any information about his business online. No company registration, no social media presence." "Lina, this isn't normal. He values privacy," Lina replied, defensive in the way of people who know they're being lied to but can't admit it yet. "Not everyone needs to broadcast their entire life online. 8. You're just jealous that I found someone who actually makes me happy." The words landed like a blade between ribs. Maricel, who hadn't dated seriously in years, who had sacrificed relationships for career advancement, who had chosen medicine over everything else, felt the accusation burn. "I'm not jealous," she said quietly. "I'm terrified. The age gap, the vague career, the way he's isolating you from everyone who cares about you. These are textbook warning signs." Warning signs of what? That someone successful is interested in me? That I deserve nice things? You want me to stay small and struggling like you, 8, alone, safe, miserable. It was the cruelest thing Lena had ever said to her, and the last real conversation they would have for months. The isolation accelerated after that. Dante convinced Lena that her sister didn't understand their connection, that Maricel's concern was really control. Lena stopped answering Maricel's calls, stopped attending family obligations, dropped out of design school because Dante said formal education would only constrain her natural talent. Maricel tried everything. She showed up at the condominium and was turned away by building security. She left messages that went unreturned. She deposited money into Lena's account with notes begging her to call, to meet for coffee, to just confirm she was safe. Nothing worked. Lena had disappeared into Dante's world, and Maricel could only watch from the outside, helpless and terrified. What Maricel didn't know, what Lena was too ashamed to tell anyone, was that the fairy tale had already turned into nightmare. By month 7, Dante's business troubles began. He needed money urgently. Investments had gone bad. Partners had betrayed him. He was temporarily cash poor but assured Lena everything would recover soon. In the meantime, could she help? Just temporarily? Lena sold her jewelry, then her laptop, then asked Maricel for a loan, which Maricel refused, hoping financial crisis would drive Lena home. It had the opposite effect. It drove her deeper into Dante's control. That's when he proposed his solution: modeling work, high-end private events for wealthy businessmen who appreciated beauty and sophistication. Just companionship, he promised. Just being herself at exclusive parties. 5,000 pesos for an evening, sometimes 10,000. Easy money while they got back on their feet. Lena, desperate to prove she wasn't the burden Dante's tone suggested she was becoming, agreed. The first event was a private dinner at a hotel in Makati. 6 men, all middle-aged executives, and 3 young women including Lena. The men drank expensive whiskey and talked business while the women smiled decoratively. At the end of the evening, Lena received an envelope with 5,000 pesos cash. "See," Dante said, counting the money with satisfaction. "I told you it would be fine. You were worried for nothing." The second event was similar. The third introduced an expectation of one-on-one time after the group dinner. Private conversation, Dante called it. Networking opportunities. By the 6th event, Lena understood what she had become. The word Dante never used but that she repeated to herself in the shower, scrubbing her skin until it was raw, trying to wash away the truth. Escort, prostitute, commodity. The clients paid Dante directly. 5,000 pesos became 10,000, became 20,000, depending on what was expected. Lena saw none of it. Dante controlled the money, doling out allowances for food and necessities while telling her the rest was invested in their future. She tried to leave once, packed a bag while he was out and made it as far as the building lobby before he found her. No violence, just words delivered with surgical precision about how no one else would want her now. How Maricel would be disgusted if she knew the truth. How she had chosen this life, and choosing to leave now would mean admitting what she'd become. So Lena stayed, and the work continued, and she fragmented into someone she didn't recognize, performing mechanical intimacy with strangers while Dante counted money and made plans she wasn't included in. 15 months after meeting him, Lena discovered she wasn't alone in his operation. There were 6 other women at any given time, all between 22 and 28, all beautiful and broken and trapped. Dante ran his trafficking network with the efficiency of a man who had perfected the business model. Find vulnerable women, offer them love and security, isolate them from support systems, introduce financial dependence, transition them into sex work gradually enough that they couldn't pinpoint when they stopped being girlfriends and became inventory. The women didn't talk to each other much. Shame and competition kept them separate. But occasionally, in the waiting room of whatever hotel or private residence they'd been sent to, they'd exchange glances that spoke volumes. "We know what we are. We know what he's done to us. We don't know how to escape." For Lena, the end began with a laptop left carelessly open. Dante had grown comfortable after 18 months. Lena was compliant, profitable, broken enough that he no longer bothered with pretense. He left his computer unlocked while he showered, never imagining she'd have the courage to look. But courage and desperation are chemical cousins, and Lena had reached her limit. She found everything. Bank accounts with millions of pesos in transactions. Spreadsheets tracking women by name, age, and earnings. Messages to clients discussing rates and services with the clinical detachment of someone selling fruit at a market. Photos of women Lena had never met, their profiles listing statistics like livestock. She found the truth about herself too. Her earnings over 15 months totaled approximately 700,000 pesos. Dante had kept every peso. She had sold her body 47 times and received nothing but trauma and control. The rage that flooded through her was cleansing, purifying. For the first time since meeting him, Lena felt something other than shame. She photographed everything with her phone, downloaded files to a cloud drive, built evidence that could destroy him. And when Dante emerged from the shower, relaxed and unsuspecting, she was waiting. "I know everything," she said, holding up her phone. "The money, the other women, all of it. I have proof, and I'm going to the police." The transformation in Dante's face was instant. The charming lover disappeared. The businessman facade crumbled. What remained was something cold and reptilian, calculating cost and benefit with the speed of someone who had made difficult decisions before. "You're not going to the police," he said calmly. "Watch me. No one will believe you. You've been doing this for over a year. Willingly. I have messages from you agreeing to every booking. I have evidence that you asked for this work. Who do you think they'll prosecute, Lena? Me? Or the prostitute whose bitter her boyfriend broke up with her? I have your financial records, your client lists, everything, which you obtained illegally by accessing my private computer. Inadmissible. And even if it wasn't, you'd have to admit what you are publicly. Your sister would know. Everyone would know. Is that what you want?" Lena's courage faltered. She hadn't thought past confrontation, hadn't considered that truth and justice might not be the same thing. "I'll tell Aunt Maricel everything," she threatened, her last weapon. "Then she'll know her sister is a whore," Dante said, stepping closer. "Is that the legacy you want?" What happened next took less than 4 minutes. Dante didn't attack in rage. There was no passionate struggle, no dramatic confrontation. He simply decided that Lena had become more dangerous alive than dead, and he acted on that decision with the same efficiency he brought to every business transaction. His hands around her throat were steady, professional almost. Lena fought, but she weighed 50 kilograms, and he'd made this calculation before. Her nails scratched his jaw, leaving the scar he'd carry for years. Her feet kicked over a table. But within 90 seconds, she stopped struggling. Within 3 minutes, she was unconscious. Within 4, she was dead. Dante held her for an additional minute to be certain. Then he released her body, letting it collapse to the floor, and began planning his exit. He wiped down surfaces, removed his laptop and any incriminating documents, took the money from his safe, drafted a suicide note in Lena's handwriting, copied from her design school notebooks. The story was classic. Depressed young woman, overwhelmed by life, chose to end her pain. By the time building security found Lena's body 18 hours later, Dante Romualdez had vanished into a network of fake identities and offshore accounts. The operation dismantled overnight. The other women scattered, too terrified to talk. Maricel identified her sister's body at the morgue. The medical examiner ruled homicide despite the staged suicide. The bruising patterns on Lena's throat, the defensive wounds on her hands, the evidence of struggle all told the truth. But truth without proof is just tragedy. Police investigated for 6 months, found nothing. The condominium lease was in a false name. Bank accounts were offshore and untraceable. Witnesses disappeared or claimed ignorance. Dante Romualdez, if that was even his real name, became a ghost. The case went cold, and Maricel buried her sister with unanswered questions burning holes in her chest. She spent the next 2 years searching obsessively, hiring private investigators she couldn't afford, following leads that dissolved into dead ends. She learned more about human trafficking than any doctor should know. She discovered that men like Dante existed in networks that protected each other, that crossing international borders made them functionally invisible, that justice was optional for those with enough money and cruelty. Eventually, she accepted what she couldn't change. Dante was gone. Lena was dead. And no amount of searching would bring either truth to light. So Maricel stopped searching. She returned to medicine with renewed intensity. She saved 2,847 lives because she couldn't save one. And every single day for 6 years, she wondered what she would do if she ever saw Dante Romualdez again. Now, standing in Trauma Bay 3 at 2:54 a.m. on a Thursday morning in November 2024, staring at the unconscious man who murdered her sister, Maricel finally has her answer. The Trauma Bay exists in a bubble of controlled chaos. Monitors beep rhythmic confirmations of life. For pumps click and whir. Dr. Cruz calls out vitals while Nurse Elena preps the chest tube insertion kit. The machinery of emergency medicine moves forward with practiced efficiency, and at the center of it all stands Maricel Delgado, outwardly calm, inwardly fracturing. Her hands continue their work automatically. Muscle memory built from 10,000 similar procedures guides her fingers while her mind riots with recognition and disbelief. She palpates his abdomen, checking for rigidity that would indicate internal bleeding. Her touch is clinical, professional, but her thoughts are screaming. This is him. This is actually him. Abdomen is distended and rigid, she hears herself say. Probable splenic rupture. Get me a fast exam ultrasound. We need to know if he's bleeding into his belly before we move him anywhere. Elena wheels over the portable ultrasound machine, and Maricel squirts gel onto the probe with hands that almost tremble. She presses the transducer against his skin, angling it to visualize his abdominal cavity. The black and white image on the screen shows exactly what she expected. Free fluid accumulating where it shouldn't be. Blood pooling in spaces meant to be empty. He's bleeding internally, dying slowly from injuries sustained when his car hit the highway barrier at speed. Without surgical intervention within the next few hours, the bleeding will become irreversible. His blood pressure will drop. His organs will fail. He'll die on this table or in an operating room upstairs, surrounded by people trying desperately to save him. The irony is so sharp it could draw blood. Positive fast exam, Maricel announces. He's got significant intra-abdominal hemorrhage. Page the surgical team. He's going to need an X-lap, exploratory laparotomy, emergency surgery to find the bleeding and stop it. Standard protocol for trauma patients with his injury pattern. Dr. Cruz reaches for the phone to call surgery, but Maricel stops him with a gesture. Wait, she says. Let me assess his other injuries first. I want to make sure he's stable enough to survive anesthesia. It's a reasonable clinical decision. Rushing an unstable patient to surgery can kill them just as surely as waiting too long. But Elena, who has worked beside Maricel for 8 years, knows her colleagues' patterns. Maricel never waits. Maricel is the physician who calls surgery while simultaneously resuscitating, who makes decisions in seconds and trusts them absolutely. This hesitation is wrong. Maricel forces herself to continue the examination. She needs to be certain. 6 years have passed, and faces change. Trauma and blood can distort features. She could be wrong. This could be coincidence, pattern recognition gone haywire, her grief-soaked brain seeing ghosts in every injured man who groans with that particular inflection. Except she's not wrong. She catalogs the evidence with clinical precision. The scar above his left eyebrow, small and white with age. Lena mentioned it once, years ago, a childhood injury from falling off a bicycle. The tattoo on his inner left wrist, partially obscured by the 4-line Elena inserted. Chinese characters that Dante claimed meant prosperity, but that Lena's research revealed meant fortune. The shape of his hands, long fingers that Maricel remembers from crime scene photographs, the hands that had gripped her sister's throat until life stopped flowing. And his voice, that groan. The same sound Lena's neighbors heard through apartment walls during arguments. The same voice that whispered promises and threats, that negotiated prices for her sister's body, that told Lena she was worthless without him. Maricel's counting ritual activates automatically, her brain's defense mechanism against overwhelming emotion. 10, 9, 8. But the numbers don't calm her this time. They just mark seconds passing while a murderer bleeds on her table. She steps closer to his head, ostensibly to check his pupillary response. The penlight beam makes his pupils constrict sluggishly, normal for his level of consciousness. His face is slack, peaceful even. No indication of the violence he's capable of. No external sign of the predator beneath the victim. Dr. Delgado? Elena's voice carries a question beneath the words. His neurological status is concerning, Maricel says, buying herself time. GCS is low. I want to stabilize him further before we transport him to the OR. She increases his oxygen flow, checks his 4 lines, adjusts monitor settings. All appropriate medical interventions that also happen to delay the surgical consult that would take him out of her hands and into someone else's care. The sedation lightens momentarily, a common occurrence as medications redistribute in a trauma patient's chaotic circulation. His eyelids flutter. His hand twitches against the restraints they've placed to prevent him from pulling out his breathing tube if he wakes. Maricel leans closer, ostensibly to assess his level of consciousness. Standard procedure requires her to speak to semi-conscious patients, to try to orient them, to gauge their neurological function through response. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asks in Tagalog, her voice steady. "You're in the hospital. You've been in an accident." His eyes open, confused at first, struggling to focus through pain and sedation and the fog of trauma. They're brown, darker than Lena's were, but with the same capacity for calculation Maricel saw in surveillance footage from hotels where her sister was sold. For 3 seconds, he sees only a doctor, a woman in scrubs trying to help him. His lips move around the oxygen mask, trying to form words. Then recognition hits. Maricel watches it happen in real time, confusion shifting to focus sharpening to recognition. Not of her name, they never met while he was destroying her sister. But recognition of features that mirror someone he killed. The shape of her eyes, the structure of her face, the resemblance that everyone always commented on, how Maricel and Lena looked like different versions of the same person. His pupils dilate, not from neurological injury, from fear. The heart monitor responds instantly. His pulse, steady at 90 beats per minute, spikes to 120, 130, 140. The alarm sounds, a shrill insistence that something is wrong. "He's tacky," Dr. Cruz observes, reaching to check the monitor settings. Heart rate 142. Dante tries to speak. His hand moves against the restraint, reaching toward Maricel in a gesture that could be pleading or warning. His eyes are locked on her face with an intensity that confirms everything she already knew. He recognizes Lena's sister, and he knows exactly what that means. "You!" He manages around the oxygen mask, the word barely audible. "You're." He's agitating, Maricel interrupts, her voice clinically detached. Increased heart rate, elevated blood pressure. "Dr. Cruz, prepare 5 milligrams of midazolam 4 push. We need to sedate him before he injures himself further." Elena draws up the medication without question, but Maricel sees the calculation in her colleague's eyes. Elena knows something is happening here that has nothing to do with standard trauma protocols. Maricel takes the syringe from Elena's hand. Their eyes meet for a fraction of a second, and in that moment, Maricel knows that Elena suspects. Not the specifics, perhaps, but the underlying truth that this patient means something beyond medical statistics. "This will help you rest," Maricel says to Dante, her voice gentle in the way of nurses comforting the dying. She injects the sedative directly into his foreport, watching the clear liquid disappear into his bloodstream. His eyes stay on her face as the medication takes effect, fear and recognition fading into chemical unconsciousness. His heart rate begins to slow. His hand goes limp against the restraint. Within 90 seconds, he's deeply sedated again. The crisis, artificial as it was, has passed. "Better," Dr. Cruz observes, noting the normalized vitals. "Should I call surgery now?" Maricel looks at the monitors, at the man who killed her sister, now completely at her mercy. His life is measured in the numbers scrolling across screens. Heart rate 78. Blood pressure 100/65 and holding. Oxygen saturation 94%. All numbers she can change with the medications standing in locked cabinets 10 feet away. "Not yet," she says. "I want to observe him for another 30 minutes. Make sure the sedation doesn't mask any deteriorating neurostatus." It's a weak justification. Dr. Cruz frowns slightly but doesn't question her. Residents don't question attending physicians, especially not attending physicians with Maricel's reputation and authority. Elena, however, asks the question with her eyes. "What are you doing?" Maricel doesn't answer. She can't. Because she doesn't know yet. The decision forming in her mind is too enormous to acknowledge, too irreversible to speak aloud. She checks the time. 3:17 in the morning. The surgical team won't question a delay at this hour. They're probably in the middle of another case anyway, grateful for the extra time to finish before taking on another emergency. She has a window, 30 minutes, maybe an hour before someone starts asking why she hasn't sent this patient to the OR. 60 minutes to decide what kind of person she wants to be. The doctor who saves everyone, or the sister who finally gets justice. Maricel pulls up a stool and sits beside Dante's bed, watching him breathe, watching the monitors track his deteriorating condition. His blood pressure is dropping slowly, imperceptibly. The internal bleeding continues. Without surgery, he has perhaps 4 to 6 hours before the damage becomes irreversible. She could do nothing, simply wait, let him bleed out while she documents everything perfectly, explaining that she was monitoring his stability, that his condition deteriorated despite appropriate care, that sometimes trauma patients die no matter what you do. It would be medically defensible, morally defensible even. She wouldn't have to actively kill him, she could just let him die. But Maricel has spent 6 years learning that passive acceptance and active choice are not the same thing. She didn't save Lena by hoping someone else would intervene. She won't find peace by pretending fate has given her this opportunity. If she's going to do this, she needs to own it completely. She thinks about the burner phone in the plastic bag labeled patient belongings, about the recent calls to untraceable numbers, about the photos of young women that suggest Dante never stopped trafficking, never felt remorse, never became anything other than what he was when he killed Lena. How many more, she wonders, how many more women has he destroyed in 6 years? How many more will he destroy if he walks out of this hospital alive? The utilitarian calculus is simple. One life versus dozens. One predator versus countless prey. But the personal calculus is more complicated. This isn't about saving future victims. This is about Lena. About the sister Maricel couldn't protect. About the promise she made at their mother's deathbed to take care of her baby sister. About the guilt that has lived in her chest like a second heartbeat for 6 years. This is about revenge. And Maricel needs to decide if revenge is worth her soul. Elena approaches with a fresh bag of 4 fluids. His pressure is dropping, she observes. 90/58. We should get him to surgery soon, or we're going to lose him. I know, Maricel says. Do you? Elena's voice is quiet, meant only for Maricel's ears. Because it seems like you're waiting for something, or deciding something. Maricel looks at her colleague, her friend, the woman who attended Lena's funeral and held Maricel's hand during the worst days after. Elena knows the whole story. She knows what this man did. She knows what he took. If I asked you to look away, Maricel says slowly, would you? Elena is silent for a long moment. When she speaks, her voice carries the weight of a choice that will haunt them both. I don't know what you're talking about, Elena says. I'm going to check on the patient in Bay 7. I'll be back in 15 minutes. She walks away, leaving Maricel alone with Dante Romualdez and the most important decision of her life. The staff bathroom on the 2nd floor is empty at 3:30 in the morning. Maricel locks the door behind her and grips the edge of the sink with both hands, staring at her reflection under fluorescent lights that make everyone look half dead. The woman looking back at her is a stranger, 34 years old but appearing older, with shadows under her eyes that no amount of sleep would cure. Hair pulled back in a surgical cap, scrubs that smell like antiseptic and other people's blood. The face of someone who has seen too much death and caused too little of it. Until now, she begins her counting ritual, the grounding technique her therapist taught her during the worst of her grief, when panic attacks would strike without warning and the world would narrow to a pinpoint of unbearable pain. 10, she whispers to her reflection. At 10, she's still Dr. Maricel Delgado, Chief of Emergency Medicine, the physician who took an oath to preserve life above all else, the woman who chose medicine specifically because she wanted to save people, to stand between death and the living and push back against the darkness. She sees that woman in the mirror, exhausted but dedicated, ethical, principled, the kind of doctor patients trust and colleagues respect. 9. At 9, she's remembering the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. Words she spoke at her medical school graduation while Lena sat in the audience, crying with pride. Words that shaped her entire career, that guided every decision at every bedside. But what is harm, really? Is it harm to let a predator live? Is it harm to choose one life over the dozens he'll destroy if given the chance? Her reflection doesn't answer. 8. At 8, she's Lena's sister. The older sibling who was supposed to protect, who failed, who spent 6 years replaying every conversation, every warning, every moment she could have intervened differently. Who knows with absolute certainty that if she had been smarter or stronger or more forceful, Lena would still be alive. That woman stares back at her with eyes full of accusations. 7. At 7, she's remembering the funeral. Closed casket because the strangulation had been too severe to make Lena presentable. Maricel had insisted on seeing the body anyway, had needed to see what Dante's hands had done. The bruising around her throat, the petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes, the defensive wounds on her arms where she'd tried to fight back. She'd touched Lena's cold hand and promised that justice would come. That promise has lived in her chest like a tumor for 6 years. 6. At 6, she's the realist. The woman who spent 2 years and her entire savings hiring private investigators who found nothing. Who learned that the criminal justice system is built to protect people like Dante, who can afford good lawyers and fake identities in offshore banking. She knows, with professional certainty, that if she reports him now, he'll disappear again. One phone call to a lawyer, one invocation of his rights, one carefully constructed alibi, and he'll walk free while Lena stays dead. 5. At 5, she's thinking about Lena's last moments. Based on the medical examiner's report, Lena was conscious for approximately 90 seconds while being strangled. 90 seconds of knowing she was dying. 90 seconds of looking into the face of the man she loved and understanding that he was killing her. Did she think of Maricel in those seconds? Did she regret not listening to her sister's warnings? Did she die knowing she was loved, or believing she was worthless like Dante had convinced her? Maricel will never know, and that ignorance is its own kind of torture. 4. She's calculating. One life versus how many future victims? She thinks about the photos on Dante's phone. Young women barely older than Lena was, the same pattern, the same predation. If she saves him tonight, how many of those women die? How many get trapped? How many end up strangled in expensive condominiums while their killers walk away rich and unpunished? The utilitarian math is simple, but Maricel's hands have saved 2,847 lives. Can she really add one death to her ledger, even if it prevents dozens more? 3. At 3, she's remembering her mother's last words. Cancer had eaten her from the inside, leaving only pain and final requests. She'd gripped Maricel's hand with surprising strength and whispered, "Take care of your sister. Promise me you'll take care of Lena." "I promise, Mama," Maricel had said. 1 year later, she'd buried them both. Some promises, it turns out, you can only keep retroactively. 2. At 2, she's asking the question that matters most. Who gave her this power? Who decided that she, Maricel Delgado, gets to be judge and executioner? What makes her qualified to determine who deserves to live and who deserves to die? She stares at her reflection, waiting for an answer that doesn't come. And then she realizes he did. Dante gave her this power when he chose to drive drunk or high or recklessly and crashed his car on a highway. When he ended up unconscious and bleeding in the one emergency room in Metro Manila, where the attending physician had reason to want him dead. This isn't divine intervention or cosmic justice. This is just catastrophically bad luck meeting 6 years of accumulated rage. 1. At 1, Maricel makes her decision. She washes her face with cold water, dries her hands carefully, straightens her scrubs, looks at herself one final time in the mirror and accepts what she sees there. A doctor who saves lives, except when she doesn't. Except when saving one life means destroying dozens more. Except when medicine and justice diverge so completely that following her oath means betraying everything her sister died for. She is not a good person making a hard choice. She is a broken person making the only choice that will let her sleep at night. She unlocks the bathroom door and returns to the emergency department. The walk back to Trauma Bay 3 takes 27 steps. Maricel counts each one, creating distance between the physician she was and the killer she's about to become. The transformation is surprisingly undramatic. No lightning strike of moral certainty. No voice from heaven granting permission. Just footsteps on linoleum and a choice crystallizing into action. The ER is quieter now. The overnight lull between late-night emergencies and early-morning heart attacks. Dr. Cruz is in Bay 7, managing the asthma patient. Elena is documenting at the nurse's station, her back diplomatically turned toward Trauma Bay 3. Maricel approaches the medication room. The locked cabinet requires her fingerprint and a 6-digit code. The security system logs every access, every medication drawn. A permanent record of who took what and when. She doesn't hesitate. Her fingerprint unlocks the door. Her code grants access. She finds what she needs on the second shelf. Potassium chloride. 10 milliliter vials, 40 milliequivalents per vial. Standard ER medication used dozens of times every day to correct electrolyte imbalances. Essential for proper heart function. Completely unremarkable. In therapeutic doses, it saves lives. In excessive doses, it stops the heart with brutal efficiency. Maricel draws up 5 vials. 200 milliequivalents total. Enough to cause immediate cardiac arrest in a healthy person. In a trauma patient with existing cardiovascular stress, it will work even faster. She labels the syringe correctly. Potassium chloride, 200 milliequivalent. The documentation is perfect because she's not trying to hide what she's doing. She's trying to make it look like an appropriate medical intervention that had an unfortunate outcome. His most recent lab work, which she ordered an hour ago, shows a potassium level of 2.1. Critically low. Standard treatment requires replacement. Her order will say she was correcting a life-threatening electrolyte imbalance. The fact that she gave him 10 times the appropriate dose will look like a calculation error, a decimal point misplaced, a tragedy of human fallibility rather than deliberate murder. She returns to Trauma Bay 3 with the syringe in her pocket and a crash cart positioned beside the bed. Dante is still deeply sedated. His monitors show continued deterioration. Blood pressure 85/52. Heart rate 108. His body is shutting down from blood loss, dying incrementally while she decides whether to let nature take its course or accelerate the process. Maricel checks the time. 3:52 in the morning. Shift change happens at 7. She has 3 hours before a new team arrives and starts asking questions about why this patient hasn't gone to surgery yet. She doesn't need 3 hours. She needs 3 minutes. She draws the curtain around the bed, creating privacy. Standard procedure for sensitive examinations or procedures. No one will think twice about it. She checks his 4-line. Patent and functioning. The medication will travel directly into his central circulation, reaching his heart within seconds. She uncaps the syringe. The clear liquid inside looks exactly like saline. Exactly like 100 other medications she's administered to 1,000 other patients. There's nothing visibly sinister about it. Just chemistry and dosage and intent. Her hands are steady, perfectly unnaturally steady. The tremor that usually accompanies adrenaline is absent. This is what absolute certainty looks like, she thinks. This is what it feels like to stop questioning and simply act. She thinks about Lena one final time. Not the Lena who died, but the Lena who lived, who laughed at terrible jokes and cried during romantic comedies and dreamed bigger than her circumstances allowed. The sister who deserved better than what she got, who deserved justice that never came. This is for you, Maricel whispers. For every girl he hurt, for every girl he was going to hurt. This is for all of us. She connects the syringe to his foreport. Her thumb rests on the plunger. 1 push, 12 seconds of pressure. And Dante Romualdez stops being a problem that haunts her and becomes a problem that's solved. She thinks about stopping, about calling surgery right now, about letting the system handle this through proper channels, about being the doctor she promised to be instead of the killer she's about to become. But then she remembers Lena's voice on the phone, 3 days before she died. 8, I made a mistake. I need help. Can we meet? And Maricel's response, still angry from their last fight, still hurt by accusations of jealousy. When you're ready to leave him for good, call me. But I'm done watching you choose him over your own safety. Lena never called back. Maricel has lived with that response for 6 years, has replayed it in her darkest moments, has understood with perfect clarity that her anger cost her sister the last chance at escape. She will not make the same mistake twice. She will not choose principles over action. She will not let this man walk away because following rules is easier than breaking them. She pushes the plunger. The potassium chloride flows into Dante's bloodstream, invisible and irreversible. 12 seconds, just as she calculated. The syringe empties. The medication disperses. There's no dramatic moment, no thunderclap, no divine intervention stopping her hand. Just a woman in scrubs administering medication to a patient. Just medicine that will kill instead of cure. Just a choice that can never be unmade. Maricel removes the syringe and caps it. Disposes of it in the sharps container where it will be incinerated with hundreds of other used needles, the evidence of her crime turned to ash. She positions herself beside the bed, a doctor monitoring her patient, waiting for the medication to take effect, waiting for the heart to realize it's been poisoned and stop beating. The first sign comes at 38 seconds. His heart rhythm changes on the monitor. A subtle shift from normal sinus to something irregular. Premature ventricular contractions. The beginning of the end. Maricel watches the screen with clinical detachment. She knows exactly what's happening inside his chest. The potassium flooding his cardiac muscle cells. The electrical signals misfiring. The synchronized contractions becoming chaotic. His heart rate spikes. 110. 130. 152. Then the rhythm degrades completely. Ventricular tachycardia. A fatal rhythm if left untreated. The monitor alarms scream into the quiet ER. And Maricel begins counting backward from 10 one final time. But this time, she's not counting toward a decision. She's counting down to the moment Lena's killer stops breathing. And she feels absolutely nothing. The monitor alarm cuts through the trauma bay like a scream. High-pitched, insistent, designed to trigger immediate response in anyone with medical training. Ventricular tachycardia detected. A rhythm incompatible with life if sustained longer than minutes. Maricel silences the alarm with practiced efficiency, buying herself exactly 8 seconds before she calls for help. 8 seconds where she stands alone with what she's done, watching Dante's heart rhythm spiral into chaos on the screen above his bed. His body jerks once, a reflexive response to the electrical misfiring in his chest. Still unconscious, mercifully unaware that he's dying. His heart rate climbs impossibly high. 160. 173. The muscle contracting so rapidly it can't effectively pump blood, just quivering uselessly while his brain begins to starve for oxygen. Maricel counts 3 more seconds. Then she slams her palm against the code blue button mounted on the wall. The alarm changes pitch. Now it's the hospital-wide emergency signal, broadcasting to every corridor and station that someone is dying in Trauma Bay 3 and all available personnel need to respond immediately. Maricel's voice, when she calls out, carries perfect urgency. Code Blue, Trauma Bay 3. I need the crash cart. She begins chest compressions before anyone arrives. Standard protocol. Textbook response. Her hands lock together, positioning on the lower third of his sternum, and she pushes down hard. 2 inches of compression, 100 beats per minute, the rhythm she could perform in her sleep. The compressions serve multiple purposes. They maintain minimal blood flow to his brain. They demonstrate her commitment to saving him. And they give her something to do with her hands besides acknowledge what they've just done. The team arrives within 45 seconds. Elena first, pushing the crash cart that Maricel had conveniently positioned earlier. Dr. Cruz right behind her, still pulling on gloves. 2 other nurses from the main ER floor, responding to the code as protocol requires. What happened? Dr. Cruz asks, moving to the head of the bed to manage the airway. Sudden cardiac arrest, Maricel says between compressions. Her breathing is controlled, no sign of panic, just professional focus on the crisis at hand. No warning. I was documenting his vitals and the monitor alarmed. VTach degraded to VFib within seconds. It's a lie delivered with the confidence of someone who has told 1,000 truths in this exact tone. No one questions it. Elena sets up the defibrillator without being asked, her movements efficient and automatic. But Maricel catches the fractional hesitation before Elena powers on the machine. The microscopic pause that says Elena knows something is wrong with this picture, even if she can't articulate what. Charging to 200 joules, Elena announces. Maricel continues compressions until the defibrillator is ready. Everyone clear, she commands, stepping back from the bed. She glances at the monitor one final time before the shock. Still ventricular fibrillation, still a fatal rhythm. The defibrillator delivers its charge with a mechanical thunk. Dante's body convulses, muscles contracting involuntarily from the electrical current. For 1 second, everyone watches the monitor, hoping for the organized rhythm that would mean his heart has reset. The line stays chaotic, unchanged. Resume compressions, Maricel orders, stepping back to the bedside. Prepare 1 milligram epinephrine. The code proceeds exactly as codes always proceed. 2 minutes of compressions. Rhythm check. Another shock at 300 joules. More epinephrine. Dr. Cruz intubates him, securing his airway with a breathing tube connected to a bag valve mask. A nurse squeezes the bag, forcing oxygen into lungs that no longer draw breath on their own. 5 minutes pass. 8, 12. Standard protocol says to continue resuscitation efforts for at least 20 minutes in trauma patients. Maricel runs the code for 28, demonstrating exceptional persistence, showing everyone that she did everything humanly possible to save this patient, all while knowing that the potassium she injected has done irreversible damage to his cardiac tissue. His heart will never restart. Every medication they push, every shock they deliver, every compression she performs is theater. Necessary theater to maintain the illusion, but theater nonetheless. She calls for medications she knows won't work. Amiodarone to stabilize the rhythm. Calcium chloride to counteract electrolyte imbalances. Sodium bicarbonate to combat acidosis. Each intervention is textbook appropriate and completely futile. Dr. Cruz, sweating from exertion and stress, performs his role perfectly. He doesn't know he's participating in an execution. To him, this is a tragic case of a trauma patient who coded unexpectedly. It happens. Not every patient can be saved, no matter how skilled the team. But Elena knows. Maricel can see it in the way her colleagues' eyes track her movements. Elena has worked enough codes to recognize normal patterns, and this isn't one. The prepositioned crash cart. The delayed surgical consult. The way Maricel was alone with the patient for 15 minutes before he arrested. Elena knows, and she says nothing. She draws up medications when asked, calls out vitals when required, and performs her role in this choreographed deception with the efficiency of someone who has chosen complicity over confrontation. At 26 minutes, Maricel calls for a rhythm check. The team steps back from the bed. The monitor shows asystole, no electrical activity at all. A flat line that means his heart has given up entirely. No pulse, Elena confirms, her fingers on his carotid artery. Pupils fixed and dilated, Dr. Cruz adds, checking with his penlight. Maricel looks around at her team. Exhausted, defeated. They've fought hard for this patient and lost. It's written on their faces, the familiar grief of emergency medicine professionals who understand that death wins, sometimes despite their best efforts. Any objections to calling time of death? Maricel asks. Silence. Just the mechanical wheeze of the ventilator they're about to disconnect. Time of death, for 23 a.m., Maricel announces. Thank you, everyone. You did excellent work. We gave him every chance. The team disperses slowly, the adrenaline crash hitting them as they process the loss. Dr. Cruz looks shaken. He's young enough that unexpected deaths still feel personal. He'll review this code obsessively, wondering if he missed something, if there was an intervention that could have changed the outcome. Maricel knows he'll find nothing. She's constructed this too carefully. Elena remains after the others leave, helping Maricel disconnect the monitoring equipment and remove the 4 lines. They work in silence for 2 minutes, 2 women who have performed this post-death ritual hundreds of times together. His labs came back, Elena says quietly, pulling up the results on the computer. Potassium was critically low, 2.1. I saw that, Maricel replies, her voice neutral. I was about to correct it when he coded. Elena's fingers hover over the keyboard. The medication log shows you drew 200 milliequivalents of potassium chloride at 3:48 a.m. for replacement therapy. His level was dangerously low. 200 milliequivalents would be. Elena pauses, doing the math. 10 times the standard replacement dose. Maricel meets her colleague's eyes. The moment stretches between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Decimal point error, Maricel says calmly. I meant 20. I must have been more tired than I realized. It's a plausible explanation. Medication errors happen, especially during overnight shifts when fatigue degrades judgment. A misplaced decimal point, a calculation mistake, the kind of error that leads to deaths in hospitals every year. Except Elena knows Maricel doesn't make medication errors. In 8 years of working together, Elena has never seen Maricel miscalculate a dose, mislabel a medication, or make any mistake that would endanger a patient. Should I document the error? Elena asks. Yes, Maricel says. Patient death resulted from unexpected cardiac arrest during treatment of traumatic injuries. Contributing factors include severely low potassium that I attempted to correct with 4 replacement therapy. Unfortunately, a dosing error may have precipitated fatal arrhythmia despite aggressive resuscitation efforts. Elena types slowly, creating the official record that will protect them both. The narrative is clear: well-intentioned treatment, human error, tragic outcome. Quality assurance will review the case. They'll recommend additional training on high-risk medication administration. They'll add another safety protocol to prevent future mistakes. And Dante Romualdez will be cremated as an unidentified trauma victim, his death attributed to a car accident and the complications that followed. I'll file the report, Elena says, standing. She pauses at the curtain, looking back at Maricel. Get some rest. You've been here too long. After Elena leaves, Maricel stands alone with the body. Dante looks smaller in death, diminished. The monster who haunted her nightmares reduced to cooling flesh and stopped circulation. She studies his face, searching for some feeling. Triumph, relief, guilt, horror at what she's done. She feels nothing, just a hollow space where 6 years of rage used to live. She completes the death documentation with meticulous care. Fills out the certificate listing immediate cause as cardiac arrest, secondary to traumatic injuries sustained in motor vehicle accident. No next of kin listed. No known medical history. John Doe number 47 to 2024, unclaimed and anonymous. The body will stay in the hospital morgue for 72 hours while they attempt identification through fingerprints and missing persons databases. When no one claims him, he'll be cremated at county expense. His ashes will go into an unmarked container, stored in a warehouse with thousands of other unclaimed dead. He will vanish as completely as he tried to vanish 6 years ago. Except this time, he'll stay gone. Maricel submits the paperwork and strips off her gloves. Her hands, she notices with clinical detachment, are completely steady. No tremor. No physical sign of the line she's just crossed. She checks the time. 4:47 a.m. Her shift ends at 7. 2 hours and 13 minutes to maintain composure. To treat other patients. To be the doctor everyone expects her to be. She picks up the next chart. Chest pain in a 58-year-old male. Possible cardiac event. She reads the vitals, forms a differential diagnosis, and walks to Bay 5 to save another life. The transition is seamless, from killer back to healer in the time it takes to cross the emergency department floor. The first 72 hours after Dante's death feel simultaneously endless and instantaneous. Maricel works her regular shifts, treats her regular patients, and participates in the regular rhythms of emergency medicine with the same competence she's always demonstrated. On the surface, nothing has changed. Beneath the surface, everything has. She waits for guilt that doesn't arrive, for remorse that never materializes, for the moral horror that should accompany taking a human life. Instead, she feels a strange, quiet peace. The constant low-grade anxiety that has hummed beneath her thoughts for 6 years simply stops. The hypervigilance fades. The intrusive memories of Lena's death lose their sharp edges. She sleeps through the night for the first time since the funeral. No nightmares, no 3 a.m. panic attacks, just deep, dreamless unconsciousness that leaves her feeling more rested than she has in years. The hospital's Quality Assurance Committee reviews the case on day 2. Maricel sits in the conference room while they discuss the medication error, her fatigue level, the tragic outcome. She answers their questions with appropriate contrition. Yes, she should have double-checked her calculation. Yes, she was at the end of a long shift. Yes, she understands the importance of safety protocols around high-risk medications. They recommend additional training. A formal notation in her file. Mandatory review of potassium administration guidelines with all ER staff. They do not recommend suspension or criminal investigation. Medical errors, while tragic, are not criminal acts when made in good faith during appropriate treatment. The committee chair, an elderly cardiologist named Dr. Mendoza, stops Maricel as she's leaving. These things happen, he says kindly. "You're an excellent physician, Dr. Delgado. Don't let one mistake define your career." Maricel thanks him and feels nothing. No relief at avoiding consequences. No shame at the deception. Just a calm acceptance that she has done what needed doing and escaped detection. On day 3, the hospital morgue supervisor files the paperwork for John Doe 47 to 2024. No identification established. No claims filed. No family located. The body is released to the city crematorium. Maricel doesn't attend. Too suspicious and unnecessary. She knows where Dante is going. She knows he'll never hurt anyone again. That's sufficient. The cremation happens on a Tuesday afternoon while Maricel is working a day shift. Somewhere across the city, Dante's body is reduced to ash and bone fragments in industrial heat. The man who killed her sister, who trafficked dozens of women, who built an empire on exploitation and violence, becomes 3 pounds of cremated remains in a cardboard container. Maricel is stitching a laceration on a construction worker when it happens. She doesn't feel any cosmic shift, any spiritual resolution. She just finishes the suture, documents the procedure, and moves to her next patient. Elena continues to watch her with careful eyes, but says nothing more about the night Dante died. An unspoken agreement has formed between them. Elena will not ask questions she doesn't want answered. Maricel will not offer confessions that would burden them both. They exist in a space of mutual understanding and deliberate ignorance. The real change comes 3 weeks later, when Maricel sees the news report. She's having coffee at a small cafe near the hospital, scrolling through her phone during a rare break, when the headline catches her attention. Trafficking network collapses, 6 women rescued in Cebu. Her heart rate accelerates as she reads. Police raided a suspected trafficking operation in Cebu City. Found 6 women, ages 19 to 26, being held in a residential compound. The women report being recruited by a man who promised modeling work, then forced into prostitution. The man's identity remains unknown, but witnesses describe someone matching Dante's description. The operation apparently ceased all activity approximately 3 weeks ago. The women were abandoned in the compound with no supervision, no contact from their captor, no explanation. Eventually, neighbors heard them calling for help and contacted authorities. The police spokesperson is quoted saying they believe the ringleader is deceased, based on the sudden cessation of all operation activity and financial transactions. Maricel reads the article 3 times. 6 women, rescued because Dante stopped existing to hold them captive. 6 lives continuing because she ended one. The utilitarian calculation she made in the trauma bay wasn't hypothetical. These are the women who would have stayed enslaved if she'd let him live. These are the lives saved by murder. She expects this knowledge to complicate her feelings, to add guilt or validation or something that shifts the moral weight of what she's done. Instead, it simply confirms what she already knew. Dante was never going to stop. Every day he lived was another day someone else suffered. One of the rescued women gives a statement to reporters, her face obscured for protection. He just disappeared. We thought he'd come back, but he never did. For the first time in months, I can breathe. Maricel saves the article on her phone, not as evidence or justification, just as documentation of ripple effects she never anticipated. That night, she finally enters Lena's bedroom, the second bedroom in her condo that has remained untouched for 6 years, preserved exactly as her sister left it. Clothes still hanging in the closet, makeup still organized on the dresser. Design sketches still scattered across the desk. Maricel has avoided this room, treating it like a shrine she wasn't worthy to enter. But something has shifted. The suffocating guilt that made this space unbearable has transformed into something gentler. She can be here now without drowning in what-ifs. She begins packing Lena's belongings methodically, not erasing her sister, but acknowledging that preservation isn't the same as honoring. Lena existed in motion, in creation, in forward momentum. This frozen museum doesn't capture who she was. In the desk drawer, beneath old sketchbooks and fabric samples, Maricel finds Lena's diary, leather-bound, the pages filled with her sister's looping handwriting. Maricel has never read it before. It felt too invasive, too much like grave robbing. She opens it now to a random page. The entry is dated 2 weeks before Lena's death. I know what he is now. I know what I've become. I found his computer files. All the women, all the money, all the lies. A tried to warn me, but I wouldn't listen. I was so stupid, so desperate to believe someone could love me that I ignored every sign screaming that this wasn't love. I'm going to leave. I'm gathering evidence. I'm going to turn him in, and maybe some good can come from this nightmare. If something happens to me before I can get out, if I don't make it, I need someone to know that he did this, that he's still doing this, that someone needs to stop him. 8. If you're reading this, it means I failed. I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I chose him over you. But please, please don't let him keep doing this. Someone has to stop him. Maricel's hands shake as she reads. The first tremor since the injection. Tears finally come. Not for the act she committed, but for the sister who gave her permission she didn't know she needed. I stopped him, Lena, she whispers to the empty room. He's never going to hurt anyone again. She sits on her sister's bed, holding the diary, and cries for the first time since the funeral. Not guilty tears. Not ashamed tears, just grief, finally uncomplicated by helplessness. Grief that acknowledges loss without demanding impossible revenge. The next morning, Maricel returns to work with a different energy. She still treats every patient with the same competence, but she begins noticing things she previously overlooked. Young women with injuries inconsistent with their explanations. Partners who speak for them. The subtle signs of control and coercion that she's been trained to recognize but too traumatized to act on. She starts keeping resource cards in her pocket. Domestic violence shelters, trafficking hotlines, legal aid services. She slips them to patients when their partners aren't watching. Whispers that they have options. Becomes the intervention for others that Lena never got. 3 months after Dante's death, a young woman comes into the ER with a fall down the stairs. Her boyfriend hovers nearby, answering questions before she can speak. Maricel treats her fractured wrist and waits until the boyfriend goes to move his car from the no-parking zone. I see what's happening, Maricel says quietly, pressing a card into the woman's uninjured hand. When you're ready to leave, call this number. They'll help you disappear safely. The woman's eyes fill with tears. I can't. He'll find me. He always says he'll find me. Men like him count on you believing that, Maricel says. But you're stronger than he's convinced you to believe, and you deserve better than this. The woman leaves with her boyfriend, and Maricel doesn't know if she'll call the number. But she's planted a seed, created an option where none existed before. It's not saving lives in the dramatic trauma-based sense, but it's saving lives nonetheless. For months after Dante's death, Elena pulls Maricel aside after a shift. I need to know something, Elena says, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you okay? Really okay? Maricel considers the question seriously. I sleep now, she says finally. I don't have nightmares anymore. I can think about Lena without wanting to die. I'm helping people I couldn't help before. She pauses. Does that make me okay? Or does it make me a sociopath? I think it makes you human, Elena replies. A human who made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. But I need to know, is it finished? Was it just him? Or is this who you are now? It was just him, Maricel says with absolute certainty. He was specific, personal, finished. Elena nods slowly. Then we never have this conversation again. 6 months after Dante's death, Maricel visits her mother's grave for the first time since the funeral. She places flowers on the headstone and sits in the grass beside it. I kept your promise, Mama, she says aloud. I took care of Lena, just not the way you meant, not the way I planned, but I kept her safe from him. He can't hurt her anymore. He can't hurt anyone anymore. A breeze moves through the cemetery, rustling leaves on nearby trees. Maricel chooses to interpret it as approval, though she knows she's probably just projecting comfort onto random weather. I don't know if I'm a good person anymore, she continues. I broke every oath I took. I killed someone. I lied about it. And I'd do it again without hesitation. She pauses, picking at the grass. But I'm sleeping, and I'm helping people. And maybe that's enough. She stands to leave, brushing dirt from her jeans. As she walks toward her car, her phone buzzes. A text from an unknown number. This is the woman from the ER 3 months ago. The one with the broken wrist. I called the number. I'm safe now. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Maricel reads the message twice, then deletes it. But she carries the knowledge like a small flame in her chest. One life taken. How many lives saved? The math doesn't justify what she did. Nothing justifies murder. But the math exists anyway, a ledger of consequences she'll carry for the rest of her life. That night, Maricel writes a letter she'll never send. She addresses it to Lena, pouring out everything she couldn't say at the funeral, everything that's happened since, everything she's become. She ends with a question she can't answer. Was I right to do what I did? Or just broken enough to believe I was right? I don't know. I'll probably never know. But I can live with uncertainty. I've learned that much, at least. Rest easy, little sister. You're safe now. We both are. She burns the letter in her kitchen sink, watching paper and ink transform to ash. The smoke detector screams briefly before she waves the smoke away. When her shift starts the next morning, Dr. Maricel Delgado walks through the automatic doors of St. Catherine Medical Center exactly as she has for 8 years. She puts on fresh scrubs. She checks the ER board. She picks up the first chart and moves forward. Not the doctor she was before, but maybe the doctor people like Lena need. The one who understands that sometimes saving lives means making impossible choices in the space between heartbeats. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.